We cannot see you and we cannot hear you. So if you have any questions over the course, we will be monitoring the Q&A. There's a button at usually the bottom of your device, depending on what you are using, that lists Q&A as one of the options. If you click there, it opens up into a different kind of chat box where you can enter your questions, and we'll be both answering them live and answering them possibly in typed format. If we don't get to everyone's questions, we will be using those questions to help clarify our frequently asked questions, or if it's something really specific, we may ask you to get in touch with us through our email or through a phone call. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague who also just turned on her camera, Jamie Hinaga. Jamie, could you just say a little bit about who you are?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am supporting Justina on the grant making process side, so can help you more on
Thank you, Jamie. And today she'll also be helping to monitor the questions and answers so that we can stay on track. So we'll be spending the next hour. I want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of the grant program is. We're going to be talking a lot about the eligibility for the grants, and then highlighting some of the key areas of the application process, which opens today. So, kind of top of mind because people who've registered can actually start applying today. And then we're both going to answer questions throughout, but try and also leave some time at the end to get your questions answered. So with that, before we really get started, I wanted to find out who is in the room today. So Jamie's going to launch just a quick poll, and it's going to give us a little more information so we know who we're talking to. You'll see a poll pop up there, and the first question is, what type of childcare provider are you? And there's several options here. We'll be sure to share the poll results with you. So I'm seeing the results coming in, and it looks like actually we have a really good mix on this call. Many who identify as group childcare centers, and also some family childcare providers. We also have some multi-site providers I see, so they have more than one type of service that they offer. So this is really good to know because I'll try and tailor the information in the webinar to address the groups who are on the call. I think we can close that poll, Jamie, and if people haven't seen the results, you can go ahead and share. And then the second question there is, how did you hear about the program? And we're curious, these are the typical ones we think may have gotten the information out to you. I see many people have heard about it both through Patch and also through the Child Care Program Office through DHS. And some maybe got an email from Hawaii Community Foundation about the opportunity. So that's really helpful to us to kind of know where people have gotten the information from. Great. All right. So a little bit about this grants program. Um, the purpose of the program is really to help administer the $15 million of CARES Act money. Those are federal dollars that have been awarded to the state of Hawaii and facilitated through Department of Human Services, specifically for licensed or registered child care providers. And the grant period is going to be fast and furious. Literally, the grant period is 2 months, so it's October through the end of November. And I did just want to highlight final reports come back to the Hawaii Community Foundation on November 20th. In part, the reason we have a short turnaround on this is we need to basically figure out if there are any funds that weren't spent, and then make sure to get that money back into the state coffers before the end of the year. And as you can imagine, there's a little bit of a process in order to do that, to go from Hawaii Community Foundation back into the pool for unemployment insurance. There's two options that you can apply for the child care stimulus grants program, and I'm going to talk more in depth about both options, but I just want to give you the top line. One is a childcare stabilization option, and this is for providers who've been open for 30 or more days. And the big goal behind that is to help pay for expenses. Maybe you've experienced decreasing enrollment or other factors. And so we hope that some of these grant funds could help to prevent permanent closure and provide some immediate relief that you're experiencing from some of the challenges you're experiencing right now. The second option, there's a real goal with this grants program that for providers who have not had a chance to reopen yet, we are launching what's called the reboot and reopen option. So for providers that are still closed but plan to open no later than November 1st, they will also qualify for funding under this grant program. We are particularly looking for, depending on what comes in terms of applications, but we will be giving some priority to areas in terms of reviewing grant proposals if people serve in childcare shortage areas across the islands. Um, and then the one piece I really do want to share for folks is I did see there's many that are on the call who operate multi-service or multi-sites. One organization or child care provider is just needs to fill out one application for this, so it can cover many of your regulated child care services or sites within the same application. So an example of that is a common combination might be that an applicant might have 5 sites. They operate 3 group child care centers, and 2 of those also have infant toddler licenses. They only need to apply once, but there's a way to kind of encompass funding for all of those in your request. I'm going to move now a little bit into the eligibility criteria. So just I highlighted a couple of things that are really key in here. All of these bullets are important, but in the interest of what we have time for the call, I think I want to just highlight for you a couple of the key pieces around eligibility. So again, I said this up front, but it's for any licensed or registered childcare program that is registered with the Hawaii Department of Human Services, and any before after school program or legally exempt A+ provider. That would look like a Department of Education contractor. Those also qualify for this grant program. And the second piece is a request that providers stay open for 6 months after the grant award. And then finally, I'm going to draw down to the last piece that's highlighted there in blue, because that's a piece that you can get started on right away. Applicants need to fulfill an insurance requirement and go through the Hawaii Compliance Express to get a certificate of good standing or of what's called vendor compliance. Um, and what that helps us check is just making sure that you're in good standing as a business with the state of Hawaii and you have no outstanding state or federal tax obligations, no taxes that are basically past due. So let me pause there. Jamie, are you seeing any specific questions come in around the eligibility piece or about the 2 different options under the grant program? Because I think I'd like to pause here and answer it.
Yes, there's a couple in the Q&A. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, your was a little muffled, and I saw Christina mention that too, but I do hear you well. Okay. Oh, if you're a nonprofit, great question. So let me address that. The 3 types of applicants that can qualify for a grant award. You either need to be a nonprofit organization, a for-profit business, or an individual. So for some of our home-based childcare providers, they might be an individual running a business, and that's absolutely fine too. So those are the 3 types: nonprofit, for-profit, or an individual. And then let's see, I think there's a specific question in there that we will try to address more one-on-one about your timing of being open and closed. And we will get into the Hawaii Compliance Express piece so that hopefully we're getting your questions answered there. So I'm just going to move on to one more piece around eligibility. I do want to call out that the non-eligibility, we went over which types of applicants, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, and individuals. There's two categories that aren't eligible for this grant award. One is if you are a school-run A+ provider. So you're a public school, but you run your own A+ program. They wouldn't qualify for this grant program. And then the second is private educational institutions or private schools that also offer K-12 services, essentially ones that hold out the education institution part of their work. And the way that we're looking at that is the Hawaii Association of Independent Schools. They maintain a list of the Hawaii Council of Private Schools, which is available and viewable on their website. And so if you're on that list, you would not be eligible to qualify for this grants program. Now I'm going to turn into a little bit about what applicants need to gather. First, so the first piece and the one that really is, we're asking people to kind of start as soon as they can, just in case it does take a little bit more time, is the Hawaii Compliance Express, getting a certificate of vendor compliance. And let's just launch a quick poll. Jamie's gonna pop something up. We wanna know, do any of you have experience with Hawaii Compliance Express? And that kind of helps us gauge people's experience with it. While she's getting that poll up, basically getting this single certificate helps avoid going to many different departments to kind of verify different information. So this single certificate helps with that, and I'll cover that once we get some results from the poll in. Great, so I'm seeing that about a third of people do have a login and have used Hawaii Compliance Express, and but for most, it's actually going to be a new part of the process, which may require actually registering for an account with Hawaii Compliance Express. So great, I think we can stop sharing the poll and, or stop getting results, and we can share the poll and close out. This single certificate, what it looks at is 4 different things. It helps us understand that you're current and to date on your state and federal tax obligations. And it also lets us know that you're in business good standing with the state of Hawaii. And we thought it'd be important to share an example. So let me call your attention to the right-hand side of the screen there. In order for Hawaii Community Foundation to work with Department of Human Services, we also needed to get our Hawaii Compliance Express certificate. And so that's what you're seeing there on the side, and we wanted to highlight it as an example. The main status piece, we'll just need to see that it does show compliance there. But there's 4 pieces down towards the bottom, the status of compliance for this issue, or sorry, for this vendor. And those help to tell us the pieces around the tax obligation in good standing and the business license or business in good standing with state of Hawaii. You'll notice one there. So if you're a nonprofit, like we follow, Hawaii Community Foundation falls in the designation of being a nonprofit status. That third one under COGS, the Hawaii Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, it shows up as being exempt. And so that would likely be the case if you are a nonprofit organization. So all we're looking for is an overall compliant, and also that all 4 of those either say exempt or compliant. And Jamie, we provided, you see right there, there's a link to the actual site for Hawaii Compliance Express. And that's something you can work on getting the certificate as whenever you have a moment to do that, and it will be uploaded as part of your application file. I did want to just note that if you are not in good standing or not clear on taxes, it would be important to try and clear that as soon as you can. Although with the short time period for the grants, we can't, you know, it's out of our hands to make sure that those things get cleared. That's for you guys to take care of. We're looking at what information comes in. So I just want to be clear. Timing is short, and so if you do need to take care of anything that's sort of on this list, like the business good standing or taxes, please start that today. All right, we're going to switch over to talking a little bit about how you get started with this. So registration can be done at any time. Many of you guys might have actually already filled out this interest to apply survey. It's just a very brief survey online. We're using this survey to help identify and kind of just verify the eligibility of potential applicants. So we're looking at whether or not you're a licensed or registered DHS child care provider or A plus program. And then based on that information, we'll get you a login to the nonprofit gateway system, which is basically just our system for filling out an online application. We are checking this information, this survey information every single day. And if you've already filled out the interest to apply survey, you should be getting your information. If you filled it out last week, you should be getting your information today, at the latest tomorrow, in order to start logging in and complete your application. I do want to pause and say, because probably what's going through your head is, I need to, apply for this today. This isn't a first come, first serve application process. What we're looking for is really complete applications, and it's going to be important to get all the information and documentation together. So I hope I can kind of assuage your worries that you have to complete this application right away, because we want to actually get complete applications and complete information. Okay. Was there any questions, Jamie? Let's pause there. Was there anything about Hawaii Compliance Express or the anything else on the early eligibility piece I should cover? Pull it up. Oh, we do have a lot of questions.
Yeah, there was a couple questions about if they're closed for Christmas, um, does that make them ineligible for the grant because you have to stay open for 6 months?
If it's a planned break for your children, it shouldn't disqualify you. What we're talking about here is, permanently closing your operations. But if it's on your calendar that between a certain period, your parents know that you're on break, it's a break, it's not a closure. So I'm going to talk a little bit now, and we'll address some of the questions I'm seeing coming through towards the end. Okay, great. So the project budget, if you take something away from this piece, is the project budget is really at the heart of the application, because that's really where applicants should spend most of their time to get this done, accurately and well. It's the part that we'll probably be spending the most time reviewing, because there are particular eligible expenses for this grant program. So we did our very best to provide maximum flexibility, but there are certain categories that are eligible for expenditures. Oh, and sorry, I started actually talking on that piece first. Let me go over this slide, which is talking about the two different options here. I did mention them in the very beginning. So the stabilization option is for providers who have been open for 30 days, at least 30 days prior to this applying for the grant. And then the reboot and reopen option, those are for folks who maybe do need some incentive, actually some cost to spend some money so that they can get set up to actually safely reopen. And on the right, you'll see that there's actual screenshot from the application itself. I want to call your attention to question 10, because that's where you'll select, I'm either applying for the stabilization grant, the reboot or reopen reboot and reopen option. And then the third option is, if you are a multi-site, multi-service provider, you can actually apply for both. And that applies like if you do have some sites that are open and some sites are closed. But don't pick that. Both one is really just if you're in that situation where you have some sites that are open and some sites that are closed. So then the tool that you're going to really use to determine what amount you can apply for, what's the maximum amount. You don't actually have to request the maximum amount, but it tells you what level your organization qualifies for. Highlighted there in red is called the Maximum Grant Award Calculator, and it's an Excel spreadsheet that we'll preview on the next page, but it helps to do the calculations on how many sites you have that you're applying for in those different categories of providers, and then it gives you basically that maximum eligibility amount that you can apply for. We'll also be going over the budget template in a little bit greater detail. We have, I'll show you those templates. And I do want to say that maximum grant award calculator is already up on the website for this grants program. And so I encourage you, you can already start downloading that. It's in the section called resources. So if you just want to start using it and kind of seeing if you're a multi-site provider, what funds you up to amount you could request, it's right there for you. Okay, and now I'm switching to, this is a view, a screenshot of the maximum, the funding maximums that organizations can qualify for. So you can see here that if you're a family childcare provider, you likely operate one site. And if you're been open for 30 days, you would qualify there for a $6,000 grant award for different expenses. Now, if you are both a group childcare center and an infant toddler center, you have a license for both. Jumping down a little bit there, you have one of each type of those. Together, you would qualify for the $52,000 grant award. And the calculations happen automatically for you. The only piece you really need to populate is the eligible licensed sites and services for both the columns that are on the left, which are the childcare stabilization option, and the ones on the right, which are the reboot and reopen option. I'm going to turn a little bit now into, this is actually where, is this where, let me see, do I go? I'm going to go over, yes, sorry, I'm going to go over eligible expenses first, and then I'll show you a little bit about the project budget template that we have. The piece I forgot to mention about the maximum award calculator is when you turn this in with your application, there's a second tab at the bottom of that spreadsheet that is for providers to fill out all their license numbers and whether or not that service is open or closed, which helps us just to kind of match the award eligibility that you have. We also need to keep good track of that in case we need to provide that information to DHS or other groups in the future. For example, there's a little more scrutiny on these dollars because they are Federal CARES Act dollars. So we are taking care to make sure we have a lot of those pieces as part of the grant records. All right, now I broke these into 3 different parts around eligible expenses just so it was more visible on the screen, but let me start with what's not eligible to be covered. Because these are Federal CARES Act dollars, there's specific requirements around it, so no administrative or indirect costs are allowed for these grant awards. That is different than if you have received an award from the Hawaii Community Foundation in the past, because we do tend to allow a certain amount of indirect costs. For this grant program, there's no indirect costs allowed on that project budget. And then also we just are asking that there's no entertainment or campaign contributions or lobbying activities that are covered. Those are inallowable uses of the CARES Act dollars. It will cover, so starting part 1 of 3, I think 2 of the simpler pieces and ones that will be very familiar are cleaning services, cleaning and disinfecting supplies, and also things like personal protective gear and other types of things you'll need to maintain a safe environment. These are things to help really implement the guidelines from DHS for childcare facilities. So it might look like I need to purchase soap, bleach, hand sanitizer, maybe even like a thermometer for one of your sites or operations. I did want to also point out that personal protective equipment is going to be, it is currently available for childcare providers through the Department of Defense here in Hawaii. And if you have questions about that, I know Patch is more versed on how to access that PPE. But it is still an allowable use within this grants budget. If there's something you would like to have covered, it's allowable. But I did want to just let you know about one other way to get PPE that you don't have to spend the funds in this grant program. Second page, so eligible expenses are also things I'm actually very pleased to say it covers things like lease, rent, mortgage payments, as long as it's the business related portion of that. Things like your utility payments, any sort of insurance payments or coverage, those are all allowable uses as part of this grants program. And then also wonderful as part of this is payroll expenses. You can actually cover staff salaries and wages. We do ask that if you're going to pick this option to include payroll as some of your line items, um, one thing that's really good about it is it's not limited to the employees that are helping to kind of that are dedicated to the interim cleaning or health and safety protocols. This can be more broad around any sort of payroll expenses you have in terms of having lost those operational expenses over time. We do ask that the hours charged to the payroll expense is documented and are available to the Hawaii Community Foundation if requested for an audit. And the key to this, if you're going to employ that payroll option piece, is that you do have a sound payroll tracking process in place. It's one of the requirements for the grant program. It can be used to pay for yourself or employees. The one piece to note is just like all the other eligible expenses, no duplication of other funds should be used for payroll expenses or any of the expenses. So, for example, if you did receive PPP or PUA funds, just making sure that the charges are not duplicated for what you've already been covered by maybe some of those other outside funding. But it's absolutely a portion of this grant program that you can apply for. And I think I forgot to just reiterate the grant coverage period. So for this immediate grant program, the coverage period is October 1st through November 30th. Any of your fixed costs, operational costs for that time period. I'm also going to share a little bit, once I'm done with eligible expenses, I'll talk through a supplemental grant opportunity. Just change my slide here. So, I jumped too far. Okay. So the last piece around eligible expenses are things like staff training. Maybe you need to train people on new safety protocols like mask wearing, hand washing, what to specifically do if there was COVID-19 exposure or specific new cleaning protocols. Those are all allowable. Reopening costs. So to make any sort of minor modifications to your environment, things like a hand washing station or air filtration or purifying, those are all possible uses of those funds. And then the last one is probably the most self-explanatory. So things you actually need to purchase for caring for children if you've already offered this at your childcare facility. So things like diapers, wipes, infant formulas, those are all allowable uses as part of this grants program. I did want to highlight, I do think because of the short time frame, fixed costs are your friend here. I think thinking about what fixed costs you may be able to put in your grant budget is a really good use of grant funds. Things that are predictable like your rent payments or your insurance payments. Those are things that you would have a really good sense of, and I do think they're a great use of these grant funds. So now I'm going to go ahead and open the project budget worksheet and just give you a better sense of what's in there. So let me close out of this PowerPoint real quick. And hopefully you're all seeing my screen now that is labeled single site budget template. This is the template that would be used for providers that just operate one site or service, and we're asking you to fill out the areas that are, to start with, that are highlighted in yellow. So provider name, and then there's a drop-down menu to just select the island that you're located on. And then also a piece here in yellow to select the type of provider that you are. So for this one, if you're a single site and you operate a family childcare home, I'm going to go ahead and select that. So down here, the categories should sound familiar because they really do track to the eligible expenses. And I'm going to just kind of make up an example here, but perhaps I really need to buy a thermometer for for my program, and I know that it's going to cost like $30, so I can enter that in here. And similarly for any other types of expenses, I'd like to cover 2 months of my mortgage payment, a portion of that, and I think I'm gonna be able to cover, the portion that's about $500. So I'm just giving you some examples about how you might fill this out. And the other really important part of the project budget template is this narrative portion. This helps us understand at the Hawaii Community Foundation what those funds are being used for. So this section right here where I have my cursor, and hopefully you can see this, is to give us some sort of justification about the expense, what it's going to be used for, how does it help you support your business, especially as it's addressing the coronavirus pandemic. This does not need to be lengthy, just something very short in here, one line. It doesn't need to be a paragraph. If there's more that you want to share with us, go ahead and add it down here in this additional budget narrative section. It's highlighted here in gray. Now, because many of you are multi-site providers, I'm going to actually close this budget template that's for the single site providers and show you this one, which is more complex to capture multiple sites that you operate. So again, the areas are highlighted in yellow to help indicate where to fill those pieces out. But what you'll notice is very different about this is there's columns across here depending on the type of um, childcare program that you run. So again, a common combination might be that you run a childcare home, but you also, or sorry, a childcare center, and you also have an infant toddler center. So those expenses you would mark in these two columns in D and E that you can kind of see here. The other thing that you will notice that is different about this is that for operators who operate on multiple islands, because of the way we actually have to report both to Department of Human Services, and also there's quite a lot of interest in the CARES Act dollars from our legislature. They would really like to know by island, where are the funds going to childcare providers. So in order to give them a really good picture of what this looks like, we are asking multi-site providers to do your budget essentially by island. So if you cover Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island, you would actually put into each of these tabs your information. And now, how are we doing on time? We are doing okay. I'm going to move through this, talking a little bit about the supplemental budget before I exit out of out of the spreadsheet and go back to the PowerPoint. So moving back again, because it's just a little easier to view on the single site budget template. Part of this grant program is there is a big amount of money, the $15 million that needs to get out the door, and we know it's quite rapid. We don't know how many applications will come in and what the dollar amount will be for those grant applications. So we're planning on basically considering supplemental grant awards at the very beginning of November. But in order to do that and expedite the process, we're actually having you put in the supplemental request as part of your application that you put in straight away. It's an option, so if you're interested in applying for those supplemental grant funds, we do ask you to fill out a little bit more information and a second project budget so that we can see for your expenses from March 15th of 2020 through September 30th of 2020, what would you like to cover through those supplemental grant awards? The nice thing is that that length of time for the supplemental grant awards is longer, so you may have more eligible expenses that you could cover in there as part of the supplemental budget. And your supplemental budget should be equal or less than your maximum funds that you had for October and November. So just kind of thinking about the max size for each element, the initial grant award. Um, so let me do it as an example. If you're a family child care provider, you'd qualify for up to $6,000 in your initial grant award. And then for the supplemental budget, you would qualify for up to another $6,000. And you can distinguish kind of where those funds go from March 15th through September. There's a tab down here at the bottom that I just clicked on, which is your supplemental budget information. It should look really familiar because it's the same template that you filled out, but it's just a different period of time. So this, we're asking you to look back on your expenses from March 15th to September 30th. And for this one, it is really important to make sure it's not duplicative expenses. So if you receive funding from another source, could be the DHS emergency contracts, it could have been through the home-based child care emergency grant awards through the Hawaii Community Foundation or another private philanthropy. If it did cover some of those expenses from the month, please don't duplicate those requests here in this budget. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to screen sharing the screen share the PowerPoint. So we covered a lot of this as I was talking through the worksheet, but this is really our way to try and expedite reviewing supplemental grant awards. Timing is very tight. So we ask that you put this in your initial application if you're interested in that, and that's how we'll consider it. You'll see here question 12, that's the supplemental request amount. And if you do go ahead and fill out the project budget for those supplemental dollars, you would enter that total amount requested right here below. Okay. And the last piece, I want to just get through some of the application, what you're going to see, so you're familiar with it, and then I'll really make sure we look at the question and answer and cover that. And really, we're getting very close to the end of what I have to share with you. So the last piece is about the licensed or registered childcare services and how you'll want to make sure to mark those in the application. So for each type of childcare program that you operate, you pick from one of these 6, although many are on this call who have multiple sites. So say you're running both childcare centers, but you also run infant toddler centers, and you're also running possibly an A+ program. For that provider, you actually need to fill out those 3 sections. And let me highlight for you where you see family childcare in the blue lettering on the right-hand side of your screen. That designates the section that you need to fill in. So you only need to fill this in based on whatever type you operate. If you don't operate a group childcare home, then you leave that whole section around group childcare home blank. But what you're going to be asked here is to identify the geographic regions that you're covering, which is the islands, and then the number of sites that are within that type of service or site that you operate, and the number of children that you cover through that program. And again, if you operate more than one, you'll be doing this same type of section, but multiple times for each type of service or site that you operate. Okay. Let me just highlight that these are a couple places where you can go, and you maybe have already gone there to get more information. As we were getting the word out, we really tried to make sure that the web page was robust, had a lot of information through the frequently asked questions. One really great resource there is the application preview packet. It includes all the application questions that you would need to be prepared to answer. So it can just help with the planning for how you might respond or what information you need to gather. You'll also find there in the resources section the maximum grant award calculator. And if you do have additional questions, our team here at the Hawaii Community Foundation is a really great team. I'm so lucky to be working with an awesome group, and we are daily monitoring the email address that you see there, the caregrants@hcfhawaii.org, as well as the phone line that is also listed there. One other way that you can join in as you're working on your application is to join me in Zoom office hours. I'm holding them every Monday evening starting next week. So that's October 12th from 7 to 8 p.m. If you have questions and you kind of want to have some live time, that would be a good time. You can sign up for participating in those office hours just by sending a quick email to the CARES Grants email address. And we did get a great question that I want to make sure to cover. I actually think it was from our webinar last night, but somebody had asked, can we, do we have to do the application in one run? With our online portal, you actually can revisit and re-access your application. So you have time to work on it and work on different parts of it before you hit submit. That includes things like the upload. So we know you need to upload a certificate of vendor compliance. You could start working on your application, but maybe upload that the next day if you haven't packaged it all together yet. Jamie, anything else about that that I should mention on the application system? Okay, great. Now Jamie, are you seeing any kind of core themes that I should address first in the questions? And then I will start scanning some of the questions. Do you see anything, Jamie?
Not anything in themes, but just a bunch of other questions. So if you go into the
Okay.
open questions,
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I see one question I'm going to answer here. So under the number of children served, we actually want to know how many children are in your care now, because we actually will have the information already about like the number of children you're licensed for. So, there's usually a number of children you're licensed for. That amount we already know. We do expect that many program providers may not be operating at full capacity right now. So the idea is just to enter the number of children you currently serve as of when you fill out the application. Okay, and oops, I clicked on the wrong one. I saw another question. I have to say it went away, but I saw a question about when we see the RFP, the application preview packet, and when will the project budget template be available. That will be available as soon as you log into your nonprofit gateway. So if if you've already received a grant award from Hawaii Community Foundation, you do have login information, but we are asking people to do that very first step, which is express your interest to apply, and we'll make sure you get all the right information you need to go ahead and log into that section of the website. And there, everything that we showed you, the project budget template, the award calculator, and other pieces are also available. Let's see. What's the
turnaround time?
I saw that. I'm going to put answer live. That's great. So the turnaround time for receiving funding, we are working that we're final deadline for receiving the applications is October 30th, although we encourage you to get it in early as long as you're able to fully complete the application. For us, it's much more important to have a fully complete application versus an early application packet. And our turnaround time is really pretty fast for once you are uh, once you get your award notification, you should get those grant funds through a check in the mail very quickly. We have it as kind of baked into our process. It could be just up to a week to kind of get, once you receive the grant award notification, to actually get a check out and mail to you. So I hope that answers the question. I kind of wasn't sure what part of the time, what part of the process that you're referring to, because there's kind of two pieces, right? Like once your application is in, we are going to be reviewing applications as soon as they start coming in, but we do have a couple of specific times when the grant award notifications would be going out to providers. Okay, see another question specific around A+ programs not necessarily being open yet. You would qualify for those reboot and reopen grant awards if there's, I guess what the question is, I think it's a conversation with the Department of Education about what the plan is for reopening, but if there's something that you could be working towards and you know that like November 1st is a realistic date to get a program open, you could absolutely apply for these grant funds with that in mind.
There are a couple of questions about people who applied for emergency, the DHS grant and not hearing back, and what do they put for the expenses for this one?
Okay, so really good question. I would check in with whoever your contact is at DHS about the childcare emergency contracts. My understanding is that they are still working on awarding those contracts. So I think there's a couple options in for this grant program. I do think one of your best options is to cover new expenses because the timeframes are also different. Your first grant award, the first possible budget for this grant award is really October through end of November, which doesn't overlap with the emergency contract. So I think focus on those expenses, but you may be referring to if you're planning to apply for the supplemental grant awards. And if you're planning to apply for that option as part of your application packet, I think the more information you could get about where in the process your emergency contract is, it will help you plan for what you could put in and not duplicate the expenses in this grant budget. Hopefully that helped to answer your question. Anything else? I covered the question about nonprofits. So just to reiterate again, there's 3 types of categories that are eligible to apply for these grant funds. They're nonprofit organizations, for-profit businesses, and also A+ providers that are Department of Education contractors. They may be either nonprofit or for-profit status. So those are the 3 categories that are eligible. All right, and we have a little more time. Please type your questions into the Q&A and we'll get through them as quickly as we can. As I mentioned at the very beginning, if we don't live answer your question or respond with, respond by typing something out to you, we will be taking all of these questions to think about how we refine the FAQ on the webpage and get information out so that you guys do have the answers you need as you proceed with application. Okay. I do see a question about if they've submitted the interest survey already. So if you submitted the interest survey on Friday, you should be getting a login by today. And then we're checking that every single day. Within 2 days, you should get a login to your nonprofit gateway portal, which is really where you do the online application. Let's see. I'm also going to live answer this question about the supplemental awards. Your supplemental award should be at the same level, up to the maximum amount that you qualified for on the first grant. So what was covered from October through November, use that same dollar amount to apply for expenses in arrear, the back payments from March through your back expenses from March through end of September. Is there a format for the report? This is a great question. Yes, and I should have highlighted as part of that application preview packet, there's a couple things in there that will be helpful. One is that there's a sample of the grant terms and agreements. So if you do receive notification of a grant award from the Hawaii Community Foundation, those are all the terms and agreements for the grants and grant use. And also in there is a sample financial report that you would submit to us. It looks a lot like the project budget. We tried to keep it simple so that you're helping to show your proposed expenses and then what you actually did expend. So those are the two pieces, and then there'll be a few narrative questions around it, just to help us understand, again, things like kids that you're serving and a couple other pieces around the narrative. So the main thing I think to pay attention to is really the financial report, and making sure that you've been able to spend all those funds that you requested and you've gotten your award check for. We know it's a short timeline to spend those funds, but very important, because I guess my big goal is I'd rather get money out to childcare providers and our after-school providers than needing to return it to state or federal government. So that's my goal. I hope you'll work with me on that goal.
And I just want to point out, Mary Lou has put in a contact to email DHS if you have not heard back about the emergency grant. So those of you who have questions, there's an email there that you can email to get an answer on the status.
Thank you, Mary Lou from Patch, for highlighting that. That's a really good resource. So there's the BESD CCPO office. It looks like they have a way you can contact them to check on your contract status. And the other piece I did want to highlight is for our family child care providers, if you did receive a home-based child care emergency grant back in May from the Hawaii Community Foundation, you are absolutely eligible to apply for this new grant opportunity. We just asked, something similar where you're not duplicating the expenses from May in this grant request. It would be for new expenses that you've had. And the one other piece I would mention with that is you will have all the funds from May were philanthropic dollars, and because these are CARE Act dollars and there are some very specific kind of federal requirements and state requirements, there's going to be more things we ask of you through this grant application and also the reporting. Great questions on here. So we're very close to time. I do encourage you, I hope what you heard in here encourages you all to apply. And if you haven't already done the first step, which is really fill out the letter of interest in applying, that's your first thing you could do right after we get off this webinar. I'm going to leave that resource page up just for a second so you can make sure to, copy and paste the URL, copy and paste that email address, and those are your kind of go-to spots for information about this grants opportunity. And with that, I think we're pretty close to time. You know where to find us if you do have other questions. Really, that CARES grant email address at hawaiicommunityfoundation.org is a great place if there's something that's very particular after you've read through the frequently asked questions and you need more information. Please email us there. We're responding to it every day.